Sahil, you have new reporting. The Democrats finally feel they have a robust agenda to run on. How are they communicating that to voters?
That's right, Lindsay. There's a sudden rush of optimism among Democrats as a result of this budget deal. Some of them are talking as if they just hit a buzzer beater in the fourth quarter of a game with Joe Manchin unexpectedly coming through with an assist. Now, why is this important? Why is this deal important? Because in swing districts like this one, where the Democrat Katie Porter is fighting for her political life, the single biggest issue that I hear from voters is inflation and rising prices, particularly on gas. A lot of people, remember, spend a lot of time driving to and from work as well as groceries. For the first time, this deal, if it passes, would give Democrats some ammunition to try to communicate to voters that they're doing something about inflation, something big about inflation, and trying to reduce the pocketbook strains that people have. Specifically, there's a major provision in here that would empower Medicare to negotiate drug prices. That's the centerpiece of it. It's wildly popular, about 80% support among the general public, and it would lower costs, particularly for older Americans on Medicare. There's also ACA funding for another 3 years that would keep premiums down, prevent a major hike that would have otherwise come this fall that many Democrats were spooked about. Then there's climate change, $369 billion in funding for clean energy. That's a major motivator for Democrats to try to get young voters out. And also in coastal California, several swing districts like this one, environmental action is popular, not just with young voters, but also moderate and independent voters who see the impacts of climate change. So that is what Democrats have right now. If this bill passes, they have that argument to communicate to voters. What Republicans are doing in places like this is hammering the fact of rising costs, hammering the fact of inflation, hammering fears of another recession and saying it's time for change. Throw the Democrats out. That's where the battle lines are. But Democrats, for the first time in a while, feel like they have something to fight back.
Well, if anyone won a buzzer beater, it's you for being in Huntington Beach. But that aside, is there a possibility here that Democrats made a misstep by announcing this before they could pass their other legislation that they wanted? For example, Senator Collins suggested that this Manchin deal could actually harm marriage equality talks.
I think time will tell on that one, Lindsay. If Democrats had to choose between reconciliation and any other bill, I think it's pretty clear they would choose the reconciliation bill. So central it is to their agenda. But on the fact of same-sex marriage, it remains to be seen whether Republicans are going to provide the votes. They did not have 10 votes in store even in the beginning. And ultimately, I guarantee you, in places like where I am right now, to normal voters, procedural justification for vengeance do not translate. If this bill doesn't pass, then Republicans are going to either defend that to their voters, say this is why we didn't want it to pass, or maybe they'll pay the price. One thing that Republicans don't want to talk about here where I am in swing districts like Orange County is cultural issues. Remember, this area has Republican DNA coursing through its veins. They support low taxes. They supported the Republican Party of Ronald Reagan and Bob Dole and George W. Bush. They do not support the Republican Party of Donald Trump. They've drifted away from that version of the GOP over the last 6 or 7 years, which is why Katie Porter is a congresswoman representing this area. Democrats are also trying to play up these cultural issues. Not only same-sex marriage, but also abortion. That could be a big issue here, particularly for younger voters, particularly for women, as well as gun violence prevention. That's where things are right now. It's unlikely, however. Democrats are not optimistic that the cultural issues will swamp the economic issues, but the headwinds for them, for the Democratic Party being the incumbent party, are so fierce that they're looking for every advantage they can get. And if Republicans do block that same-sex marriage bill, it probably won't end up particularly, well for them politically in areas like this, Lindsay.